Committee on Foreign Affairs will come to order. I would ask everybody to rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. The purpose of today's hearing is to discuss the department's progress in changing the institution's culture, putting American business and protecting American industry first in our foreign policy. This requires diversifying and securing critical minerals and energy supply chains away from China, reinvigorating our commercial diplomacy enterprise, and letting economic statecraft lead the department. Instead of recognizing myself for an opening statement, I'm going to recognize Representative Young Kim for the opening statement for the majority side. And in that, Representative Kim, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Mass. I'm happy to offer opening remarks. Today, this hearing focuses on commercial diplomacy, which the President's national security strategy puts at the tip of the spear of our foreign policy. We will hear how the State Department, through the leadership of the Undersecretary of Economic Affairs, deploys the bureaus and offices of economic statecraft to support American businesses abroad, protect American industry at home, and advance our national security interests. For too long, we assumed that global markets would naturally align with U.S. interests. That assumption has proven false. Our adversaries have weaponized trade, investment, supply chains, and technology to undermine American industrial capacity and expand their influence. As the President has said repeatedly, economic security is national security. Whether we're talking about enforcing sanctions, securing critical mineral supply chains, building new semiconductor manufacturing capacity, expanding energy exports, or strengthening transportation networks, these priorities are about protecting America, American workers, businesses, and our strategic position in the world. Under President Trump's leadership, U.S. foreign policy is guided by a clear principle: American strength, commercial, industrial, technological, is the foundation of American diplomacy abroad. Today, economic policy is not separate from foreign policy. It is at the heart of it. Last year, this committee led a State Department authorization process to evaluate reforms, ensuring the department has the expertise, the structure, and leadership that is necessary to execute that agenda effectively. Many of those provisions are now law. We will continue pursuing additional reforms, especially those that empower the bureaus and offices under Mr. Helberg's purview. Any reform must meet a simple test. Does it make the United States stronger, safer, more prosperous? The State Department, and particularly the so-called E-family, plays a critical role in this effort. Its global diplomatic footprint provides leverage no other agency possesses. As we continue our oversight, the committee will examine whether returning the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service to the State Department and strengthen our commercial diplomacy regime, reinvigorate a neglected FCS, sharpen accountability, and better align economic tools with foreign policy objectives. That influence must be matched with clear priorities and measurable accountability. Since assuming his role last fall, Undersecretary Jacob Helberg has emphasized supply chain security, allied coordination, and competition on critical and emerging technologies as core priorities. Earlier this month, he helped convene the 2026 Critical Minerals Ministerial, bringing together 54 nations to advance more secure and diversified supply chains. His Pax Silica initiative focused on securing the full stack from energy and critical minerals to advanced manufacturing and next-generation technologies reflects the type of integrated economic strategy this committee expects to see from the department. As Congress, we have a responsibility to ensure these initiatives endure beyond any single administration. That is why I, alongside with my ranking member, Ami Bera and Chairman Brian Mast, we introduced the Bipartisan Dominance Act to make the United States the partner of choice for countries seeking secure, diversified, and resilient critical mineral supply chains. Breaking China's chokehold on critical minerals will not happen overnight. It will require sustained bipartisan resolve here in Congress and in close coordination with the administration. So I look forward to working with you, Mr. Helberg, to ensure that your efforts represent not just the progress, but decisive step forward, ending China's control over the strategic supply chains. Let me be clear. American economic strength is the foundation of the American leadership abroad. Diplomacy should reinforce U.S. competitiveness and support American workers and businesses and strengthen our long-term industrial and technological base. The department must be empowered to engage and negotiate from a position of strength. That means standing up to unfair economic practices, enforcing the rules, supporting U.S. energy and exports, and ensuring that American economic power is used deliberately and strategically. We need to ensure our foreign policy institutions are aligned with the realities of the global competition. I thank Undersecretary Helberg for joining us today, and we look forward to discussing how economic statecraft is being implemented and what Congress can do to ensure it delivers true results to the American people. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Kim. And I don't know if this is because people from Rhode Island deal with snow better than people from New York, but offering an opening statement for the minority side is Representative Amo from Rhode Island. So you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm grateful that the people of Rhode Island allow me to be here while they go through 3 feet of snow and are doing their best to recover from that. Mr. Chairman, thank you for organizing this hearing. Despite this committee's oversight role over the State Department, we have had, frankly, very few administration witnesses appear so far this Congress. So I am glad to have the Undersecretary here for this critical hearing. Mr. Helberg, thank you for testifying today and welcome. If you ask most Americans what the core of President Trump's foreign policy approach is, they probably give you one word: tariffs. And to the president's credit, he's been consistent on this. He ran on tariffs, he imposed tariffs on our rivals, and even more so on our closest allies and partners. Unfortunately, as the Supreme Court ruled on Friday, he has done so illegally in an end run around Congress. And he has done it at the expense of our diplomatic relationships. But the costs have been most disastrous for hardworking Americans. American families have shouldered the burden of Trump's tariffs through higher prices, bearing 90% of businesses' increased import costs. Trump's tariff schemes cost American families $1,700 last year. And American farmers and businesses have been forced to lay off workers as the economy has seen the lowest rates of employment growth outside of the recession years since 2003. And all that pain for what? Did it improve America's trade deficit? A flat no. Despite the president's promises, America's trade deficit only decreased by 0.2% last year. And we have not seen the massive onshoring of companies back to the U.S. that he pledged either. The U.S. manufacturing sector lost 70,000 jobs in 2025. But the president remains dead set on finding new ways to tariff. The worst part is the administration knows very well that the pain its sweeping tariffs have caused on the American people. Why else would they backtrack and issue countless exceptions, only adding to the chaos and economic volatility for American companies and consumers? Because they know tariffs are unpopular, House Republicans resorted to procedural hijinks to avoid voting on the Trump tariffs for nearly a year. We finally forced a vote earlier this month on Ranking Member Meeks's bill to stop the Canada tariffs, on which some of my colleagues across the aisle voted yes. But the vast majority of Republicans voted to protect Trump's tariff regime at their constituents' expense. Let's be very clear. The president's America First policies, his tariffs, his gutting of the State Department and USAID, and his tarnishing of NATO and other allies have left the United States weaker and more isolated today than we have been in decades. This administration has disrespected, lectured, coerced, and ignored the very allies we need to overcome complex global challenges, including the strategic competition with China. Now, I was glad to see the administration recently unveil promising new initiatives to bolster critical minerals and AI supply chains after China retaliated against the president's trade war with crippling rare earth export controls. But multilateral initiatives like this will not succeed so long as this administration continues to take its allies for granted and goes out of its way to disrespect them. I worry that if we don't course correct soon, the damage will, in fact, be permanent. If you continue treating your allies like your adversaries, they will eventually be forced to respond in kind. Our allies are already hedging, accommodating the president in the short term while also securing new investment and trade deals with China. It's no surprise that the Canadian and British prime ministers visited China last month for the first time in nearly 8 years. It's also no surprise that our oldest allies are discussing a Canada-EU-Pacific trade bloc that would exclude the United States. This is a clear case of cause and effect. This is America First in action, and it will leave America less prosperous and less respected on the world stage. America First is America alone. The American people deserve answers on how the administration's policies are affecting our global standing, alliances, national security, and economic prosperity. So I look forward to the discussion today, and I yield back.
Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We are pleased to have the Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy, and Environment, Jacob Helberg, before us today. Your full statements will be made a part of the record, and I'll ask that you keep your spoken remarks to about 5 minutes in order to allow time for member questions. Undersecretary Helberg, you are recognized.
Thank you. Chairman Mass, Ranking Member Meeks, and members of the committee. I did not come here today to litigate trade data or walk you through compliance spreadsheets. I came here to speak to you about national survival. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Jacob Helberg, President Trump's Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs, serving under Secretary Rubio. The nation that controls the industrial foundations of artificial intelligence will lead this century. The nation that doesn't will depend on those who do. That is why the United States has built Paxilica, an economic security coalition for the AI century designed to secure the supply chain infrastructure that underlies national power. We have built this coalition with Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Israel, the UAE, the UK, Australia, and Qatar, along with essential partners like the Netherlands and Taiwan. Just last week, we welcomed India into the fold. We are entering an economic era that will reorder wealth and power, favoring nations that can build and scale free from coercive dependencies on adversarial choke points. In the first industrial revolution, the newly industrialized surged ahead. Historians called it the Great Divergence. The global economy is now on the foothills of another similar divergence driven by AI, and the numbers show the slope. Paxilica members are growing more than 3 times as fast as their G7 peers, averaging 3 to 4% of GDP growth per year since the release of ChatGPT, compared to 1% for G7 countries. China has placed the AI revolution at the heart of its new 5-year plan, enhancing innovation at home while aggressively competing for market share abroad. American technological leadership requires supply chain security. Paxilica is our strategy, and we have wasted no time implementing the principles adopted last December. Our efforts focus on 2 fronts: execution and alignment. First, on execution, we begin with the arteries of global trade, logistics. In his inaugural speech, President Trump made clear China's control of the Panama Canal was entirely unacceptable to our national security. I'm pleased to report that last month, the Panamanian Supreme Court invalidated China's control, paving the way for a buyout by BlackRock. Building on this success, I have directed my office to conduct a strategic review of all logistical corridors with prior State Department involvement, including the Libido Corridor, the Andes Atlantic Corridor, and the Luzon Corridor in the Philippines. We will engage Pax Silica partners to expand and modernize these corridors by marrying existing infrastructure with new technologies delivering speed, scale, and certainty to suppliers from Tokyo to Tel Aviv, from Singapore to San Francisco. Next, the muscle, industrial production. Industrial capacity is not nostalgia, it is the muscle of sovereignty. Thanks to Secretary Lutnick, Secretary Besson, and Ambassador Greer, America is reindustrializing. My office is a force multiplier, facilitating partnerships with the world's largest industrial companies and focusing economic diplomacy on scalable mineral projects in the United States and allied nations. And finally, the cognition of modern manufacturing, core and edge AI infrastructure. The American AI Exports Program is a whole of government effort to share the benefits of American AI worldwide. Working with the White House, OSTP, Commerce, and Exim, we are scaling this program to meet the explosive demand for trusted core AI infrastructure. And last week, we launched a concierge service to provide Pax Silica members with consultative support in adopting American technology. Recognizing that much of the world interacts with AI at the edge through smartphones, not expensive data centers, we also launched a competitive process to award up to $200 million in foreign assistance for secure, low-cost devices running on the American software ecosystem. Second, on alignment. Pax Silica will deepen coordination in 3 policy areas: protection of critical infrastructure and sensitive technologies, alignment of market incentives and anti-dumping practices, and the promotion of a pro-innovation approach to AI policy. Earlier this month, Vice President Vance and Ambassador Greer outlined the contours of a preferential trade zone for minerals and at the Critical Minerals Ministerial, a major effort ahead for anti-dumping and market incentive coordination. Last week, we signed the U.S.-India Joint Statement on AI Opportunity, a pro-innovation blueprint against efforts by other nations to weaponize global governance as a concept into an instrument of control and wealth extraction against American companies. And yesterday, the UAE's largest AI company, G42, announced plans to pilot a common operating picture framework that protects sensitive American technology through cryptographic tracking and real-time verifications. If successful, this framework could scale across the Pax Silica ecosystem. We are moving in Trump time, making progress on all fronts, all at once, and expect to see early results before the end of the calendar year. Consider what this coalition has already accomplished that traditional diplomacy could not. Qatar and Israel now sit inside the same economic framework, a new road toward normalization built not on shared ideology, but on shared supply chains. That is proof that Pax Silica works. Under President Trump's leadership, America is not waiting for the new divergence to arrive. We will shape it and set the terms. Thank you. I look forward to your questions and welcome your partnership in moving Pax Silica from architecture to enduring advantage for our people.
Thank you, Undersecretary Helberg. We're now going to recognize members for about 5 minutes of questioning, alternating between Republicans and Democrats. I'm going to begin by recognizing Representative Kim.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you again, Undersecretary Helberg, for joining us today. Right here. Good morning. The Commerce Department has proposed cutting the staff of the FCS, or by more than half in fiscal year 2026. Over the past 2 decades, long before the creation of DOGE, the number of staff in Commerce's International Trade Agency, which includes FCS, has fallen by 1/3 from 2007 to 2025, and additional personnel reductions are on the table. the steady decline in personnel and funding for FCS is inconsistent with what was argued when FCS was pulled out of the state and moved to Commerce in 1979. Some members of the committee want to strengthen the U.S. commerce diplomacy and are considering whether to move the FCS back to the State Department. So first question to you is, what are the pros and cons of moving the FCS to state, in your opinion?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. Last year, before my swearing in, the State Department underwent an extensive reorg to better align its people and capabilities with its core diplomatic mission. The basic rationale was that steady bureaucratic accretion and ossification under administration of both parties had really distracted our department from its core mission, which consequently undermined its effectiveness and relevance. Ultimately, the department's reorganization streamlined department reporting lines and optimized our workforce and drove efficiencies in our operations. Currently, we have moved incredibly fast to achieve a record number of peace deals as well as bilateral agreements for critical minerals. We're very satisfied with the results that we're making. If the Congress chooses to pass reform through both chambers to undertake a reorganization of the department and build on the work that we did last year, that is certainly a consideration that I'm sure the White House would be happy to engage with you on.
If, let's say, the FCS does not come back to the estate, what additional authorities or tools do you need to build states' commercial diplomacy to the level that is necessary to fulfill President's national security strategy?
So we already have economic officers dispatched at embassies. We do find those resources helpful. So we have used, I'll give you one example. We launched last week a chip concierge service to turn our economic force dispatched at embassies into business development officers that help promote the adoption of American technology. With that being said, so far, I've only been sworn in for about 4 months. I can't say that I've encountered significant limitations based on limitations of headcount, but I'd be happy to work with you to make sure that the objectives you're trying to advance are actually getting satisfied.
Thank you, thank you. You know, in addition to overseeing the E-family, my subcommittee has jurisdiction over the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation and the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. And I also serve on the House Financial Services Committee that oversees the Exim Bank, which we're in the process of reauthorizing. All of those agencies can be tools in our effort to diversify critical mineral and energy supply chains away from China. So who in the administration is the traffic cop for making sure each agency's critical minerals initiative is coordinated and not duplicative? And in what regard, how do the Mineral Security Partnership, well, at the state, and of course we have Project Vault at Exim Bank, and the DFC's increased authority to invest in critical mineral projects align together?
Thank you very much for the question. Interagency coordination is incredibly important, and the National Security Council runs a very rigorous interagency coordination process. With respect to the Mineral Security Partnership, one of the deliverables that was outlined at the last Critical Minerals Ministerial was actually the conversion of the MSP into what has now become the Forge, and to which we have added a number of countries through bilateral agreements. Vice President Vance and Ambassador Greer at that historic summit unveiled the concept of creating a preferential trade zone with our allies by the establishment of a buyers club. We believe that this is the key unlock to directing private capital into the mineral refining and mineral extraction sector in a way that really is financially and economically viable. So we will work on a whole of government basis in coordination with USTR and the NSC to actually advance this preferential trade zone concept. Through my capacity at the State Department, I'm actually coordinating with the NSC to advance this concept, which was primarily led by USTR through the Pax Silica initiative, because Pax Silica countries are home to the vast majority of high-end technology manufacturers outside of China. And so we're very committed to interagency coordination. We try to maintain a balance between having an entrepreneurial approach while making sure that there's nothing duplicative and that we can leverage each other's programs as a force multiplier.
Thank you. As you implement the Forge, if there are additional authorities or tools you need, please let us know. Happy to work with you. Thank you.
Happy to work with you as well. Thank you.
Representative Amo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks again, Undersecretary, for being here. You're responsible for advancing American commercial interests abroad, opening markets, supporting U.S. businesses, and strengthening our economic position. Because your role is so very important to the U.S.'s role in the global economy, I want to make sure we're on the same page with a few straightforward yes or no questions. Can the United States thrive in the global economy completely on its own, yes or no?
Thank you, Congressman, for your question. The United States is obviously not alone. We just hosted one of the largest.
So that's a yes. I got limited
largest
time.
ministerials in our department's history, with over 55 countries in attendance.
Does the United States have economic and national security advantages that depend on strong alliances and global partnerships? Yes or no?
Congressman, the United States has probably the strongest alliances it's ever had. We created
Great,
the
thank
Board
you.
of
No, I'm
Peace
going to reclaim my time. Hold on.
through the National Security
Should public
Council.
officials ever use their positions to enrich themselves or their families? Yes or no?
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating the
Should
question?
public officials ever use their positions to enrich themselves or their families?
I obviously and totally disagree with the premise of your question.
It's a yes or no.
It's
All right. Well, that's.
agree with the premise of your question. You're implying improper conduct, which I obviously disagree with. There's no basis for that.
Well, I'm sure nobody's made any money off of the dealings that are happening right now. But let's keep
I'm
going.
sure the
should
irony isn't lost
should
on
our
me.
foreign policy be based on the profit motives of private individuals over that of working Americans or our national security?
Congressman, you're making an insinuation about malintent, which I again,
Mr. Helberg, I reclaim my time. If you can't give
disagree
clear
with.
answers to these simple questions, that tells me a lot. The reality is this, and I think you agreed with this part, which is we do not succeed alone. Our economic strength depends on alliances, and public service is not a vehicle for personal gain. I believe that. I would hope you believe that too. But you seem to think it's fine that public officials in this administration are using their positions to enrich themselves and
I
their
did
families.
not say that.
Well,
You're
you didn't
putting
answer
words-
the question.
you're asking rhetorical
Here's the
questions
thing.
and
Here's the
putting
thing. President Trump's chaotic tariff policy undermines that reality. Instead of fulfilling your role as Undersecretary to stabilize our commercial diplomacy, you said that Trump's tariffs are, quote, an indispensable shield, unquote, that will bring back American manufacturing. Trump's tariffs have been declared by the Supreme Court as illegal, arbitrary, and constantly shifting. And after the Supreme Court made its ruling, he announced a new 10% global tariff and wants to go higher. That kind of whiplash makes it impossible for our allies to negotiate in good faith. And workers, manufacturers, and American consumers are suffering the consequences. That's a fact.
No, it's
Recent
not.
studies, excuse me,
Inflation is under
I'm reclaiming my
3%.
time, Mr. Helberg. Recent studies have shown Americans are paying 95% of these tariffs, and they cost the average household about $1,000 in 2025. And domestic manufacturing has declined under President Trump's watch. The manufacturing industry lost 108,000 jobs during the first year of his second term. And we're going to hear differently tonight, but those are the facts. Manufacturers in my district, the people I work for, that you work for too, are telling me that they're hurt and they're not being helped. One told me, quote, if the goal is to help bring back manufacturing industries and jobs to the United States, the current administration's sweeping tariff policy is having the complete opposite effect. A so-called indispensable shield does not create chaos. It doesn't raise costs, and it doesn't weaken our standing with our allies. Your job as a public servant is to strengthen American commercial diplomacy, not to defend Trump's instability that makes us less competitive and less trusted around the world. Costs are rising, small businesses are struggling, and our global credibility is eroding. That is the state of the union, the real state of the union that we should be hearing tonight, but we're gonna hear the opposite. We will hear some half-truths and maybe some lies. We should be pursuing a stable, strategic trade policy that strengthens alliances and lowers costs, not pushing one that creates confusion and hands leverage to our competitors. Look, I look forward to you and your role deciding that you're going to stand up for the American people, to put Americans first and not America last. That is what public servants are supposed to do. I'm not trying to lecture you, but the American people are looking for more. They're demanding more. And with that, I yield back.
Representative yields back. Representative Huizenga is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry to my colleague. I guffawed when he said he wasn't trying to lecture you. It sounded like a lecture. And I don't know about the manufacturing base in Rhode Island, but I can tell you the manufacturing base in Michigan, at worst, has been mixed, and most economists there will tell you it's been an improvement for manufacturing in Michigan. Mr. Helberg, I do want to note that I'm going to focus on some of the technology, but I am pleased to see and to hear that you are talking about places like the Panama Canal, about the Luzon corridor in the Philippines. I've spent an extensive amount of time in the Philippines. I think that, frankly, is one of those areas of the world that has been not focused on enough, and the influence of what has happened because of China and what they've been doing. I want to talk a little bit about your tweet yesterday that you had put out, and you had talked a little bit about G42 in your opening statement. I too have been long concerned with the security of America's crown jewels, technology deployed, and how it's being deployed worldwide, especially in countries like UAE with historic ties to the Communist Party. That's why I'm encouraged, like you were in your tweet, about the assurance compute framework unveiled by the UAE-based AI company G42 as part of this Pax Silica. Could you tell us a little bit, just unpack very quickly, because I want to get to another issue, about the importance of creating safeguards so the U.S. technology doesn't fall into the hands of the Chinese Communist Party?
Absolutely, Congressman, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to weigh in on this. So, as you know, the BIS rule that was rolled out in January requires exporters to meet very strict conditions, including U.S. third-party testing, know your customer procedures, and physical security certifications, and screening of all remote access users. The reason that the G42 announcement yesterday is significant is because it actually sets a pilot for a potential model on a voluntary basis for a large company to use cryptographic tracking as well as end user verifications to track every single token on G42's AI cluster. They agreed to build a common operating picture that could allow American policymakers to actually have total transparency and assurance that the clusters in the UAE used and owned by G42 are not being accessed improperly by individuals and entities that would go against American export control rules. So it's a voluntary framework. It's incredibly, it's an incredibly positive.
Yeah, I agree. That's why, frankly, I'm sponsoring the Chip Security Act, which would ensure that our AI chips can't be smuggled into places like China. Supply chain resilience is a key to dominating the global economy. China understands this. They're exploiting every avenue that they can to gain an advantage over the United States and the West writ large. I was pleased to see the rollout of Pax Silica, which seeks to secure the supply chain of the entire AI stack by working closely with partners and allies to protect this future-defining technology. I also want to note that I applaud the addition of India to that. They are a very it rightly acknowledges their geostrategic place and significance in the development of AI. Can you provide insight into how Pax Silica interacts with other multilateral forums such as the G7, the Quad, and AUKUS, and where do you see opportunities to expand interagency cooperation?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. So the interesting aspect about Pax Silica is that it's a grouping of countries that is unique and different from the G20, the G7, as well as other pre-existing groupings that the U.S. had been a part of. It is a grouping tailored for the AI economy. So it includes countries that actually have unique and differentiated capabilities that make significant contributions to different layers of the AI supply chain. India is probably the only country in the world that rivals China in terms of the depth of its human capital and talent. It's also the world's third largest mineral refiner, even though it currently accounts for only 1% of global market share. Obviously, South Korea and Japan are home to incredibly advanced high bandwidth memory companies, as well as semiconductor manufacturing companies. The Pact Silica includes countries like I2U2 and the Quad. So it actually is more comprehensive. And one of the beneficial aspects about it is we have intentionally kept it flexible. So it is a multilateral grouping. It's a platform where we can do plurilateral work. Not everything has to include all 11 countries. So we're using the platform to engage countries on a bilateral basis as well as a plurilateral basis to partner with each other, as well as to partner with each other in third markets, including in places like Africa, which is obviously the main home of the vast majority of where the world's minerals currently come from.
I just returned from Nigeria not that long ago. They're very interested in these types of things. So my time has expired, but I appreciate you being here today and giving you an opportunity to actually speak. So with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Sherman, you are
Mr.
recognized.
Chairman, I'm going to use the first minute or two to deal with an issue perhaps relevant to the Middle East Subcommittee and also to the rights and privileges of members of this committee. There are a number of statutes that require the administration to give notices to the committee. And of course, in due course, those are shared with the ranking member and notices shared with all members of the committee. There's probably nothing more important than preventing nuclear proliferation, and an important part of that is whether we agree to a nuclear cooperation agreement with such countries as Saudi Arabia. These come together because in 2020, I was able to add Section 1264 to the NDAA, which requires that before the president even begin to allow Congress to review a nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia, he has to file 90 days in advance of the beginning of the review a statement with this committee, a report. And in fact, it appears that a report was filed in late November. It is quite possible that this report went to your personal office rather than the committee's office, in which case it would have been ineffective and the clock would not have started. In any case, no Democrat became aware of this, at least no Democrat on this committee became aware of this until this month. Now, I hope that this committee will draw the line and say that report has not been filed with the committee, at least until February, and that's when the 90 days begins. But much more important, we've got to look at whether we want a nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia that does not have the safeguards that we negotiated with the UAE. And that's why I hope members of this committee will co-sponsor a bill that I've sent a dear colleague out on that is the bill that Senator Rubio and I introduced in 2018. And it requires that for a nuclear cooperation with agreement with Saudi Arabia, there has to be an affirmative vote of Congress. So while the procedure is interesting, the substance has got to be that we need an affirmative vote. I think Senator Rubio was wise, perhaps sometimes wiser than Secretary Rubio, and I hope that all members will join me in that effort. As to the statement of our witness who says that whoever leads in AI will lead in this century, I agree with you. But you assume it's going to be the United States or China. Some people might bet on Europe. But your statement doesn't start on the idea of what if AI itself is in control. Humankind is spending trillions of dollars to make AI more powerful. Virtually nothing, I would say nothing, is being spent to monitor for and prevent self-awareness, ambition, self-direction. I have a bill on that, and I hope my colleagues will join me. and to establish a research center to look at that. And in the meantime, I would commend to our witness the 2008 hearing that we conducted in this room that I chaired, dealing with AI, using the Non-Proliferation Treaty as a model for what you should be negotiating with China, not, with regard to making sure that AI is controllable. The movie industry is one of our biggest exports, and it's a multiplier because it sets the tone. It makes our other products interesting. It builds our name brand. It helps our foreign policy. It really influences and controls world culture. And yet, our movies have to deal with a number of unfair barriers. Most importantly is in China, where only 40 movies are allowed every year to be in their theaters. We could limit China to only 40 electronic products or 40 toys. We have a situation in China where instead of the theater owner giving half the revenue, not even half the revenue, half the box office revenue, nothing for the popcorn, to the movie maker, it's sometimes as low as 20%. Australia and Canada have local content provisions. What steps are you taking so that our trading partners will fairly treat the movie exports?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. There's a lot of topics that you touched upon there. So on your concerns about nuclear, that obviously falls under the remit of my colleague, Undersecretary Donano, who oversees 123 agreements. With respect to your comment on AI, our policy is we are very concerned about the landscape getting quite competitive between the US and China. And so our policy is to accelerate innovation through tax incentive, energy dominance, and deregulation that allows accelerating the build-out in the US.
My question is humankind versus AI, not China versus the US. If the US beats China, but AI itself is in control, as I told to one Chinese diplomat, the machines that destroy humankind will be designed in Silicon Valley, not in Shanghai. Therefore, we win.
Congressman, I think you're articulating a hypothetical future where machines take control. What we do know today for sure is that China is racing to outpace us in AI innovation, and that the benefits of their AI progress flow directly to the People's Liberation Army. And that is a national security risk that we are not willing to take. And so our policy is to make sure that the US government stays in the lead. By at home, we want to accelerate innovation, and abroad, we want to encourage the adoption of American technology.
Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to kind of I'm over here. Here we go.
There you are.
I want to kind of tie your China expertise with our conversation today. First of all, just to comment, you mentioned that Qatar is now in Pax Silica, and I represent a district in North Texas, and we are very concerned that Saudi money and Qatar money are funding the Islamization of Texas. So as you go about this, just take that point back. Now, in your remit, apparently you are responsible for reviving the defense industrial base, amongst other things, domestically. And you admit that AI includes critical minerals. So the first question is, how do we deter China if they process 92% of all critical minerals today, and they import 73% of their oil? And I'm going to be referring to Tidal Wave, done by the Heritage folks, Strategic Exploitation and Sustainment in the U.S.-China Conflict, because my first question is critical minerals and oil, and then we'll move on.
And so, sorry, your question, Congressman, was how do we deter China to do what exactly?
Yeah, if they already process 92% of all critical minerals around the world, how fast can we pare down their 92% of processed minerals, regardless of where they're mined? Start with that one.
Thank you for the question. It's obviously this fundamental challenge that our country faces that we are racing to address. Our approach is multifold. We, on the one hand, are racing as fast as possible in order to bring that number down. You're entirely correct that China processes somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of the world's refining capacity. We want to bring that number down, and we're working to do that by focusing on brownfield projects in a multitude of different geographies. So while the Commerce Department, along with USTR, are focused on revitalizing projects, refining projects in the US, the State Department is supplementing those efforts by looking at and mapping out where the biggest and most promising refining capacity on a brownfield basis are located, and then identifying who the right constellation of partners are to deploy capital and bring those projects back online. There's refining capacity in Australia, there's refining capacity in India, in South Korea. We want to expand that, and we can do that on a much more compressed timeline than building refining capacity entirely from scratch. You also brought up the point about deterrence, which is really key. And while it's true that China controls 90% of the world's refining capacity, the US China is incredibly vulnerable for its energy imports. Right. And that is a point of leverage that the administration is keenly aware of. Obviously, the Chinese are also very much aware of that, and that is very much part of how we look at our economic deterrence posture.
Okay, and last year we held a hearing on the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy. Now under your jurisdiction in E, how is the positioning of this bureau improved or enhanced the state's interest to advance our leadership abroad in all of these emerging technologies? Because it was pretty moribund. So tell us how you have improved their actions.
So it's very simple. Prior administrations had a very government-centric approach to technology, focusing on engaging international forums and the like, focusing on standards and norms. Our approach is based on the premise that our innovations come out of the private sector, not the government. And so a lot of our work is geared at engaging private companies who are actually the engines of where a lot of these innovations come from. We're doing this to secure the supply chain through offtake agreements. We're doing this to help better understand vulnerabilities in the map of the supply chain. It is through engaging with the private sector that we are actually addressing a lot of the challenges that our technology companies face.
Okay, and quickly, you've mentioned AI several times here. When you match AI with quantum computing, people seem to think that will be the keys to the kingdom. Can you address quantum computing with AI?
So let me just preface with saying that quantum computing is probably one of the most advanced fields of scientific research that, in all honesty, less than 100 people in the world truly understand. With that being said, I would agree that the combination of the power of quantum computers combined with the capabilities of artificial intelligence is incredibly potent and would really be unlike anything we've experienced. And so I agree with that statement.
I recommend you follow it closely, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Self. Representative Barra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Secretary Helberg. I'm going to ask about a piece of legislation that we passed out of this committee in a bipartisan way that created the U.S. Foundation for National Security and Counterterrorism. Also was led in the Senate by Senator Graham and Coons. It created a public-private partnership that leverages the private sector and philanthropic funding to make our federal dollars go further in preserving vulnerable protected areas in allied and partner developing countries. It'll fall under your bureau. Initial steps have been taken, but it isn't quite meeting the statutory guidelines to fully launch this piece of legislation. And again, it should fit with the priorities of Secretary Rubio as well as the administration in creating that partnership. You've only been on the job for 4 months, so I won't ask you to give me the full details, but what I would love is if the committee, either at the staff level or at your level, could just give us an update to the committee, to the members of progress, and if there's anything that you need on our end. Again, nonpartisan, a good leverage, a good bill. So would love to get that feedback and get a sense of how implementation's going.
Thank you very much, Congressman. So I am tracking the implementation of that bill. I know it's an issue that Senator Graham and Senator Coons care a great deal about and received bipartisan support. My understanding is there is still some ongoing discussion about who the right nominees are for the staffing of this new foundation. I'd be happy, the selection of nominees is obviously rests with authorities that are outside of the State Department's purview and resides with the president's choices out of the White House and the Presidential Personnel Office. I'd be happy to follow up with my colleagues at PPO as well as engage your office to make sure that the questions that you raised, that we can provide answers to them.
Wonderful, thank you. Also, last year, I introduced the bipartisan Mineral Security Partnership Authorization Act. That's part of the Dominance Act that Chairwoman Kim discussed, nonpartisan and so forth. Earlier this month at the Critical Minerals Ministerial, Secretary Rubio announced the Forum on Resource Geostrategic Engagement, or FORGE, as a successor to the MSP. Outside of broadening the coalition and bringing additional countries in, can you briefly give us an update on how FORGE is going to differ from the MSP again, and what that looks like?
Absolutely. So FORGE includes a number of different new members. So the composition of the membership is slightly different, but the most important difference is the introduction of the preferential trade zone concept, which is really the landmark concept introduced by Vice President Vance and Ambassador Greer at the Critical Minerals Ministerial earlier this month.
So just expanding on that, for the preferential trade zones, will that be housed under your bureau, or will that be under USTR, or a combination of both?
So trade negotiations are really led out of Commerce and USTR primarily. So ultimately, they tend to be the ones leading those discussions. With that being said, the work of my bureau will be including them and coordinating with them very closely to advance the preferential trade zone concept through the Pax Silica framework. So we want to make sure that all of the world's biggest manufacturers of the most strategic technologies are actually signed on to this preferential trade zone concept, because those are the main off-takers for the world's minerals.
And then briefly, just following up on a line of questioning that Congressman Self had. Recently, Chairwoman Kim, myself, Congressman Olszewski went down to Peru to look at some of the U.S. company mining operations down there. Obviously, there's plenty of rare earth elements, critical minerals around the world. Congressman Self rightfully suggested there's a choke point on the refining capacity. That still largely gets sent to China. The Chinese also undercut the market in terms of how they approach this. So again, I'm heartened to see that prioritization of creating redundant refining capacity. May not be in the United States, but if places like India, Malaysia, other parts can develop that, we will have other places to send.
Absolutely. One of the interesting things about Pax Silica is that because it's home to some of the world's largest investors, and by that I include not just sovereign wealth funds, but also large companies that deploy capital in lots of different places, is the opportunity to partner with them in third markets. And so you're completely correct that geographies like Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam are already home to quite a bit of refining capacity. Obviously, it's nothing compared to China, but as I mentioned earlier, the presence of brownfield projects is really the main platform that will allow us to actually bring our dependency rates down quickly.
Great.
Thank you. Representative Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, sir. I'm 4 months on the job, you're in front of us. That's good on you. Thank you for your work and your explanation and what you're doing with Pax Silica as well. Your opening statements kind of remind me of what the president is also focusing on, and that's how important the Indo-Pacific is on economic and geopolitical background in the 21st century. We understand Deputy Secretary Landro is currently in Honolulu there for a Prosperity Summit talking about investments and security in the region. Of course, we have our second island chain, too, that's also very important to the United States, the Federated States of Micronesia, Palau, and Marshall Islands as well. And Guam is part of that second island chain, too. We have U.S. aid is quite helpful, but in many of these islands, Chinese aid exceeds the U.S. And now we're faced with looking at the rare minerals and where we're going to get that next, and it's going into the deep sea mining. So this is really a controversial issue for the Pacific Islands. In fact, all the U.S. territories have voiced opposition to deep sea mining, as well as Palau and Fiji and Federated States of Micronesia, Tuvalu and Vanuatu. So, Mr. Helberg, how does the department seek to deepen their cooperation with the Pacific Island countries in commercial diplomacy enough to counter Chinese advancement in the region? And is the department leveraging its cooperation with MCC and DFC enough in this region?
Thank you, Congressman. One of the notable approaches of this administration has actually been to engage a lot of countries that historically the United States and prior administrations have tended to overlook. One of the ways in which that's reflected is we have forged bilateral deals with countries like Kazakhstan, with Armenia and Azerbaijan. I have personally met with leaders from the Cook Islands, the Marshall Islands, Palau. So we are engaged with Pacific Island countries. Based on my conversations, I'm not tracking significant opposition to deep sea mining. In fact, a lot of them seem to be quite open to it. They did note, obviously, the presence of certain environmental groups that have concerns about deep sea mining, but the ones I've spoken to really seem to see this as an economic opportunity and a path to economic development. And they'll be very quick to point to that China's obviously all in and racing to exploit deep sea minerals without asking for anyone's permission, sometimes in violation of the sovereignty of some of these Pacific Island countries. So one of the president's very first executive orders after being sworn in was on deep sea mining. And so we are very much looking at the implementation of that executive order, both through partnerships with Pacific Island countries, as well as by engaging American private companies who are actually developing the kind of cutting edge technology needed to operationalize this. There's a company that is looking at building a very, very large marquee polymetallic nodule refining facility in Texas that actually holds a lot of promise. And so that is one of the projects that we're looking at through the Pax Silica Consortium at potentially supporting.
Thank you. We did meet with BOEM also, and they're on their way to Guam too. And there's some regulation changes where they're now saying they don't have to engage the government or get the opinion from the public. But I can assure you, it's not hunky-dory. It's not going over too well. But the explanation needs to be clear and questions need to be asked. There's different technologies that they're still looking at. But I understand from this point, there is some time to really look at this, but I'm really concerned, and from your point of view, sir, I appreciate that you make sure the people of the islands are well taken care of. This is our livelihood, the ocean, and we can't have that really disturbed. But at the same time, we want to look at the nation's, the importance of our security in the nation as well. Can you touch on just a little on the MOU you have with Cook Islands?
So we, as you know, I think it was the week after the president's inauguration, the Cook Islands signed a bilateral MOU with China, which was less than ideal. Since then, we have obviously engaged the Cook Islands, and we are basically looking at dramatically expanding our commercial relationship with them, including with respect to infrastructure investments, which they are very much eager about. They want infrastructure investment for telecommunications, for transportation infrastructure, as well as for deep sea mining, which is obviously something that we care about a great deal for our national security.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the job.
Thank you.
Representative Wilczewski.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I do want to thank Chairman Mast for holding this important hearing. I'm going to thank you, Undersecretary Helberg, for being here today. I'm going to start by saying how much I agree with the need to protect American interests, including our national security. It's why I want to open my remarks by thanking my colleagues, Chairman Mast, Representatives Kim, Bera, and Huizenga, for their leadership and their partnership on the Dominance Act, legislation that will help crack down on China's chokehold on critical minerals. I look forward to our consideration of this bipartisan and bicameral legislation. Mr. Secretary, though, you opened by emphasizing America's need to build and scale AI free from adversarial influence, explicitly citing China as one of the major areas of concern. Given those valid concerns, I feel a little obligated to point out that just last month, the Wall Street Journal reported that just before President Trump's inauguration, Sheikh Tahnoon, the UAE's national security advisor and owner of AI firm G2 that you also referenced, quietly bought a 49% stake in the Trump family cryptocurrency business World Liberty Financial for $500 million. That money came through a UAE royal family entity, which reportedly sent about another $187 million directly to Trump family entities and another $31 million to entities tied to Steve Witkoff's family. Soon after that massive payment, President Trump approved UAE's access to roughly 500,000 of America's most advanced AI chips every year, with nearly half going to, wait for it, Sheikh Tahnoon's company, G42. National security personnel had previously flagged G42 for its ties to China, warning in 2023 that Beijing was exploiting the relationship with G42 to advance espionage against U.S. government officials. But it doesn't stop there. Tahnoon-controlled firm MGX used World Liberty's financial stablecoin to funnel $2 billion into Binance in 2025. Just 7 months after that, Binance founder CZ, the crypto con king, received a presidential pardon from President Trump. So let's be clear. A powerful UAE royal wants US AI chips he can't access. He writes an enormous check for nearly half of Trump's crypto venture, enriching Trump, the Witkoffs, and other insiders. The same network funnels $2 billion into Binance through World Liberty Financial stablecoin, followed swiftly by a high-profile pardon. Facts, Mr. Undersecretary, not suggestions. And all of this unfolds while Trump and his family are still publicly associated with World Liberty Financial on the website. And we're close enough you can see it. They're still on the website. It seems pretty clear to me. This is not diplomacy. This is a pay-to-play scheme and a pay-for-pardon pipeline. Americans who are being crushed by higher costs know exactly what's going on. The rich and the powerful are buying their way out of accountability, and the corruption is beyond acceptable. Anyone with common sense can see it. So, Mr. Undersecretary, first, do you dispute any of the facts as I've outlined them to you?
Yes. So I think there's obviously a lot to unpack in your recap of the Wall Street Journal story that you're referring to. But I think if I could just start by the beginning. The first is there are assertions about World Liberty Financial. There's assertions about malintent around the UAE, and then the
Those are just facts, Mr. Secretary. There are no assertions there.
If I could just finish, you went on for quite some time. And then there is the question of what is the relationship between World Liberty Financial and the UAE. So I am privy to no particular information about Liberty Financial. What I will say about the UAE's, the connection between World Liberty Financial and the UAE is based on a Wall Street Journal story. And I'm sorry, but I know better than to operate on the assumption that every Wall Street Journal story is entirely factual.
So
and
would
true.
you welcome an oversight hearing on this issue?
And what I will
Would you
say,
welcome an oversight
well,
hearing on this
if
issue?
I could just finish,
We can clarify.
If I can just finish the answer to your question, and what I will say is, I think that question and the accusation really presumes has baked into it a presumption of malintent and malfeasance on the part of the UAE, which I really think is not warranted. The UAE joined the Abraham Accords incredibly early at great political cost to itself. It is a major investor across the board. It has leadership.
They're a major investor, all right.
That is very interested in technology, and it's a major investor in our technology sector. They invested in Global Foundries. They brought Cerebras almost back from the dead, and Cerebras today is a crown jewel of American technology. It is a semiconductor design company, and we're very lucky to have talented founders in the US that were able to get resources to actually build transformative technology. The last point that I would add is your assertions about there being improper conduct, I think presumes that the UAE somehow got access to technology that it wouldn't have been able to get, which is totally not true because we want to export AI chips.
I just
We
laid out
have
the facts as they're
AI
presented,
export
Mr.
program
Undersecretary.
that aims entirely at exporting AI chips, and we launched the chip concierge service to provide white glove.
We could do all
support
that without that
to-
investment in the Trump family
to provide white glove
cryptocurrency. We could do
support
all that
to
without the pardon.
countries to give them access to AI technology. So the UAE was never barred under this administration from getting access to AI chips because we want to encourage their adoption of AI chips. We don't
They
want
could
them
have
to
had
run
that without the
on Chinese semiconductors.
unquestionably bad timing of that kind of a massive investment in a Trump family business. You can't agree that that's at least a bad look?
It's Congressman. What I will say is, I'm not going to comment on the Wall Street Journal story. It's unconfirmed, and
Well, then let's have a hearing. We can confirm it. Let's get to the bottom of it.
And the position of the administration is we actually support. We think it's a good thing if foreign countries and companies want to buy American technology. My role
And I
as
look forward to you doing that without it enriching public officials in the process.
My role
Move
as,
to
as Undersecretary of
Representative
State is to
Wilson.
promote
All
American
right, thank you,
companies.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Wilson is now recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Secretary Helberg, I want to thank you for your promotion of economic growth. It's so important with the achievements of record investments that President Donald Trump has made. I've never seen a president with such achievements. We know that he secured $150 billion while he was visiting with promises from the EU. His visit to Qatar, $96 billion, to Doha, and then on to Saudi Arabia with $96 billion. UAE, $100 billion, as you mentioned. $50 billion from Japan and $75 billion from Korea. Over and over again, you have a great job because you're dealing with a president who is making record. We've never had anything like this. I mean, it's just, these are jobs. And with that, the Trump administration policy is mutually beneficial economic diplomacy. With that in mind, in the case of Syria, 54 years of Ba'athist socialist regime, dictatorship, has been ended with the ouster of mass murderer Assad. Investments are critical for stabilization and prosperity in line with the President Trump's vision. And I'm really grateful he was the one who said, give Syria a chance while he was visiting Riyadh. And then from that, he lifted the Caesar sanctions. And so we're on a way to indeed develop a relationship, a positive relationship with such an important country. And additionally, there are remaining barriers such as old business laws, the pending lifting of the state sponsor of terrorism designation and security of private industry. What is your department doing to make it available to the Syrian government? And also, I was really happy President Chairman Mast met with President al-Shara here in Washington, and historically, it was the first visit by a Syrian leader to the White House in 250 years of American history and 8,000 years of Syrian history. With that in mind, what can we do to remove barriers for more investments in Syria?
Thank you very much, Congressman. And let me just say that I entirely agree with your observations. As you know, the president announced the lifting of sanctions on May 13th of last year. OFAC has issued a general license in May, broadly authorizing previously prohibited transactions. We are engaged in a gradual rollback of sanctions on Syria. The president made it clear during his historic visit to the Middle East that our policy is to give Syria a chance at greatness, which includes rolling back sanctions, encouraging private investment, the rebuilding of foundational infrastructure in order to allow the Syrian economy to actually come back out from the cold after it was frozen out from the global economy during the unraveling of the Syrian revolution. If you have specific tactical ideas, I know that Congress repealed the Caesar Act, which was obviously an important step. If there are tactical ideas that you would like to share with my office on additional steps that we could take, I would certainly welcome working with you and your team on that.
And immediately, we will be in touch, and indeed, we need to lift the state sponsor of terrorism, and I'm just so hopeful for the people of Syria, what this will mean. And then, as you're doing this in the context of my home state of South Carolina, we understand foreign direct investment. I'm just really grateful to work with Governor Jim Edwards to recruit Michelin to South Carolina. We now have the world's largest Michelin tire manufacturing facility in my home district of Lexington. And then working with Governor Carroll Campbell, I was really grateful he recruited BMW. We're very happy. $18.2 billion investment. Even Chairman Mast would be impressed with that number. And I'm really grateful that what occurred, initially they were skeptical. They were thinking maybe Bavarian Motor Works would have to change the name of Bubba Motor Works. Well, Bubba's done good. And so it's mutually beneficial. And then I'm really grateful with Governor Nikki Haley, Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Tim Scott, Attorney General Alan Wilson. There was an effort by the Obama administration to close the Boeing facility in Charleston, but we fought back. And now there are 10,000 employees there. I'm really grateful President Trump visited to point out how significant the 787s are worldwide. And I'm grateful just a couple of months ago, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was back in his hometown of Charleston, where it was announced that Boeing would be doubling their production, and it was very helpful that President Trump received a $96 billion order of 787s while visiting Doha. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Schneider.
Thank you, and Mr. Undersecretary, thank you for being here. Tonight, the President will address the nation, talk about the State of the Union, and undoubtedly claim that the economy is strong. You mentioned in your opening remarks that America is reindustrializing. And just briefly, I'm going to try to manage time. I have a lot of questions. How many jobs did the U.S. economy create last year?
Congressman, as you know,
Number. I'll tell you, it's I'm claiming my time. It's 181,000 jobs, far fewer than,
expanded
excuse me,
at
I'm
a
reclaiming my time.
pace,
How many manufacturing jobs did the economy create last year?
Congressman, I'm not sure you're interested in my response.
Well, it's an answer. This is an absolute.
So, as you know, the president secured $9 trillion.
All right, I'll stop you because you're not going to answer the question.
Into the U.S.
The economy lost. I'm reclaiming my time. The economy lost jobs last year. The Bureau of Economic Analysis, President's Bureau of Economic Analysis says the economy grew at 2.2% in 25. That was the president's first year. It grew at 2.4% in 2024, President Biden's last year. The economy has room to grow. There's things to work on. I will just question your claims. You came here and you said you don't want to talk about tariffs, you don't want to talk about trade, but I think we have to. You talked about Pax Silica, which pays homage to, I think, previous terms of Pax Americana, which was the 80 years of the world order we knew and made America so prosperous between World War II and really just last year. Pax Britannica, 100 years of security under the British between the Napoleonic Wars and World War I. Pax Romana, which is the first time the term is used, which was 200 years between Emperor Kaiser Augustus and Marcus Aurelius. These periods were defined by statesmanship. Pax Americana, established under the leadership of President Truman and Secretary of State Marshall, President Eisenhower and Secretary of State Dulles, Pax Britannica had statesmen like Disraeli and Gladstone. Pax Romana, I mentioned before, founded by Caesar Augustus, who was the builder. It ended with the death of Marcus Aurelius, who was a philosopher king. Statesmanship matters, as we're trying to do and what we're talking about here of leading. Unfortunately, I think there's a third famous emperor during Pax Romana, which was Nero, who was defined as capricious, narcissistic, self-indulgent, autocratic. Unfortunately, I think what we will see from the president will not be the statesmanship of previous leaders, but more like Nero. And Nero, I want to come back to Pax Silica. You said it includes the world's largest investors. You said it's a focus on AI. Two questions in the final 2 minutes. Do you believe, unlike the previous references to peace, Pax Americana, Pax Britannica, Pax Romana, which were led by nations and statesmen, is your view that it's going to be AI that governs the world for the next generation? Yes or no?
Congressman, there is a lot to unpack.
Don't unpack. I'm asking a simple question.
And what you said.
Is AI going to dominate, or will it be people? Will you be looking out for workers, American workers and American families, or is it going to be the great investors that are investing in Pax Silica?
It's one might ask, and it's not lost upon us the irony of where was your concern for leadership when we had a president who went in hiding for 4 years?
Why are you deflecting from a basic, simple answer? The American people are concerned about AI and where it is leading.
If I could finish, and if I could have 30 seconds to answer your question, we believe AI is a transformative technology, much like electricity was 150 years ago. We believe it causes gains in productivity. Here are the facts. Unemployment is below 3%. Productivity is over 5%.
Unemployment below 3%?
Over 5%. The economy is objectively incredibly strong. It is attracting trillions of dollars of foreign investment in the U.S. These are statistics that everyone thought was impossible.
I'm going to reclaim my time because you're clearly not speaking reality.
I am
inflation
facts
just
that you
this month. Inflation was recorded at
You're
2.4%. I'm using the statistics coming out of this administration. Inflation at 2.4%. The job creation last year was revised from 584,000 jobs by this administration, 584,000 to 181,000. AI is transformative. It's going to make a huge difference. But we need to understand it from the standpoint of how do we keep American workers safe and looking to a future where they can prosper and provide for their families? How do we make sure that Americans' privacy is protected from AI? How do we make sure that AI and America leads to make the economy stronger, America's future stronger, and American communities more secure? That's all I'm asking you. You've sat here all day saying everything is complex and needs to be unpacked. I haven't finished.
As a country to finally reshore.
I am speaking. You haven't let every question we've asked has been unpacked.
If you want him to respond, you can let him. Otherwise, your time
I yield back my time.
Representative Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commercial diplomacy is critical to advancing the interests of America and its allies abroad. Today marks 4 years since Russia illegally invaded Ukrainian soil. As we solemnly remember the lives lost in this tragic war, I want to discuss the important work that Undersecretary Helberg and his team are doing at the State Department to use economic levers to cut off the Russian war machine and protect the Ukrainian people. Mr. Helberg, I am encouraged by President Trump's statement earlier this month that Prime Minister Modi promised India would stop purchasing Russian oil. I recently introduced the No Aid for Russian Energy Act with a group of bipartisan colleagues. This bill highlights the need for all of America's allies to stop enabling the Russian oil industry, which continues to fund Putin's illegal war. Can you share how this administration's agreement with India takes an important step in countering Russia and supporting Ukraine?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. As you know, the administration has instated a policy of maximum pressure on Russia. The goal of the administration is very much to bring about an end to the war in Ukraine. That included the instatement of secondary sanctions, which, as you point out, had the effect of affecting a number of different Indian interests. Ultimately, the reaching of the bilateral joint statement on trade between the U.S. and India has brought about a positive resolution to those discussions. And the content of the bilateral statement on trade include historic purchases by India from the U.S. on energy, historic cross-border investment, and I believe it was in the first quarter of the president's administration, President Modi and President Trump set a goal of increasing overall bilateral trade flows to $500 billion. So I'm incredibly confident in the trajectory of the U.S.-Indian relationship. It's incredibly strong. I actually just got back from India. I was there 3.5 days ago. Our new ambassador there is doing an unbelievable job. If you have additional ideas on ways that the U.S. and India could work together, we would certainly welcome and are always looking for ways to deepen that vital relationship.
It is critical that America's allies throughout the world commit to stop purchasing Russian oil. I co-sponsored the Sanctioning Russia Act of 2025, which has the support of the President and will create economic levers to encourage other nations to stop funding the Russian war machine. How can economic levers be used to encourage other nations to stop relying on Russian oil?
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating the question, Congressman?
How can economic levers be used to encourage other nations to stop relying on Russian oil?
So this really strikes at the heart of the twofold approach that the administration's taken, which is maximum pressure, which my understanding is both chambers have supported the Sanctioning Russia Act, which has gotten 84 co-sponsors in the Senate. The president has expressed support, which obviously provides the administration a great deal of leverage and as everyone knows, would provide the president the authority to instate 500% tariffs on countries that continue trading energy with Russia, while simultaneously expanding the total supply of energy outside of Russia. So that includes bringing Venezuelan sources of energy back online. That includes expanding our domestic energy production. We now have a domestic energy production that actually exceeds Saudi Arabia and Russia combined, which is truly historic.
Counterfeit drugs present a health and safety crisis, particularly in impoverished nations. Counterfeit and substandard drugs from China present a serious safety concern across the world. A November 2025 article from the Center for Strategic and International Studies stated that counterfeit drugs not only endanger patient safety, but also erode the foundations of the U.S. innovation economy. What steps can the United States take to ensure that countries throughout the world have access to American pharmaceutical products? They're safe, tested, and reliable.
Thank you for the question. You are entirely correct that our pharmaceutical supply chain has a lot of the same structural weaknesses as our semiconductor supply chain and our shipbuilding supply chain. It has fallen victim to decades of offshoring. Ultimately, the combination of the president's tariff policy as well as the deployment of strategic investments in these sectors will help us achieve the ultimate inevitable goal that we need to reshore part of those supply chains domestically while working with allies in order to move quickly to actually get that supply chain outside of China. India, to your earlier point, is the second largest supplier of pharmaceutical compounds. One of the challenges with India is that they themselves rely on a lot of inputs that come from China. So we need to work, this is where Pax Silica might be able to be a helpful platform because we need to work with all of our allies to make sure that we can reshore that capacity outside of China.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. The chair will now recognize Representative Costa for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I want to turn back to the issue of critical minerals, specifically as it relates to Ukraine. Today is the 4th anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I remember being in classified briefings in the months leading up to that invasion. about how long this might last. 4 or 6 weeks. Putin apparently thought 3 days. The brave Ukrainian people have been standing up for their sovereignty, and we have been part of a coalition that has tried to protect and allow them to stand up for their sovereignty. I remember Senator Graham talking, and others of my Republican colleagues, that it was a clear case 4 years ago about good versus evil. I still believe it's about good versus evil. The administration, to its credit, recently signed an agreement with Ukraine on critical minerals. But for that agreement to come to fruition, Ukraine has to win the war. Most of these critical minerals are in the Donbass region that Russia currently occupies a part of. It seems to me that the president suggested that Ukraine give up that territory, even though Russia has failed to conquer that territory after 4 brutal years of war, makes Ukraine more susceptible to Russia's, and by the way, Russia has broken every agreement they've made over the last 25 years. Makes it more vulnerable to attack. So how do you expect us to capitalize on Ukraine's critical minerals given all these factors? I don't see it.
So the first step, Congressman, is obviously ending the war, bringing about an orderly end to.
Yeah, it was going to be 24 hours. It's going to be real easy. The first day I come into office, it'll be over.
This war. If I could just answer your question. So President Trump shares your goal of wanting to end the war. He has actually kept in place all of the sanctions instated by the previous administration. Not only that, but he's actually added sanctions on the 2 largest oil refineries and oil companies in Russia. The goal is to paralyze Russia's logistics and its biggest sources of revenue, because we want to deprive Russia of the resources that it is using to prosecute the war. That is very much the premise behind the president's support for the Sanctioning Russia Act, which is a historic, incredibly far-reaching bill that would impose 500%
Let me go
tariffs.
beyond that, and I appreciate your response, but we have a piece of legislation in the Senate that has overwhelming bipartisan support that would add further sanctions, to your point. In addition to that, we have further leverage, and the president likes to talk about having leverage, but when you talk about Putin understanding that we're continuing committed to support with our allies and NATO Ukraine's efforts to stand up for its own sovereignty, I think is the real leverage that Putin will ultimately understand. That's my view. And let me shift over here now to China, artificial intelligence and chips. I read that you've written a book, Wires of War, Technology and Global Power, Struggle for Power, calling for stronger U.S. strategy against China's technological ambitions. I haven't read the book, but maybe you can get me a copy and you'll autograph it for me. My concern is that, I don't know if you agree, but China, for every administration, is a challenge because 1, they're an adversary. 2, they are a competitor. And 3, they are a vast market. And in those 3 areas, it makes it a real challenge for any administration. But because we agree that the technology is critical, you mentioned the new safety framework of the G42 and implemented this week. You talked about safeguards, rails to stop China from accessing chips from G42 and in the UAE. I concur, but why are we selling chips, some of the most advanced chips, to China? It makes no sense.
Congressman, thank you for your question. And if I may, I'd like to characterize the administration's strategy for winning the AI race. Last year, President Trump delivered a landmark speech that focused on where he declared that the United States would win the AI race. The United States is the birthplace of where the AI race began, and we're committed to winning it. He rolled out an executive order. There are 3 conditions that have to be met for America to win the race. We need to have secure supply chains, we need to have the world's best AI innovation, and we need the most market share. Sometimes when we diffuse technology internationally, that can create a trade-off in our qualitative edge for innovation, which is why this debate remains so vexing. What we have done to maintain that edge, instead of artificially restricting access to American technology, is actually forge historic AI deals in the Middle East, which is really America's equivalent of the Belt and Road Initiative. And this graph provides you a visual illustration of market share and innovation, and winning the AI race would really mean that we want to end somewhere up into the right of this graph.
Well, my time's run out, but I think we may have to agree to disagree, because I think the current effort to sell advanced chips to China is in direct conflict of this graph and what you're trying to do, what we all believe is in our own self-interest. And I think we need more discussion on this area. I'm very concerned about our national security in selling advanced chips to China. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Davidson of Ohio for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you. And thanks, Chairman. Thanks for the hearing today. Undersecretary Helberg, thank you for your efforts and those of the entire Trump team to reform the State Department and to put America first. And by that, I think it's long overdue. The basic concept that America's resources should advance America's interests seems to have been way out of whack at the State Department. Thanks to Secretary Rubio and his leadership for realigning those things, the most basic idea that our resources should advance our actual interests. So thanks for pushing back on the globalist agenda. And in times of commercial diplomacy, it crosscuts, that at its essence. So from Chairman Mast's effort to enact a mission-driven reauthorization of the State Department in our committee's state reauthorization bill, to Secretary Bessent's mission to de-risk and reindustrialize our economies, as he said, it's Main Street's term, as well as fights against globalist control tactics, such as undermining the U.S. dollar and seeking to implement central bank digital currency. There are so many key parts of the agenda that cut through Department E at the State Department. I just want to thank you and Secretary Rubio's team for putting our country first with the efforts there. So, Mr. Secretary, I think one of the defining fights of our area, I think the future is really going to be determined in a lot of ways about the future of money. So money is increasingly being corrupted into a tool for surveillance, coercion, and control. And the epitome of that is what China is doing with central bank digital currency. The alarming thing is that the Bank of International Settlement, which is the central banker to the central banks in Basel, Switzerland, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada, they're all working to implement not just any form of essentially communist money, but the Chinese Communist Party's version of communist money, central bank digital currency with all the kinds of tools that are there. So I guess, what are the efforts there at the State Department to counter this kind of mass surveillance technology and defend the power of the dollar?
Thank you, Congressman. I share your concerns. The work that we do in the Economic Undersecretariat for the better and for the worse, unfortunately, does not focus a great deal on cryptocurrency. With that being said, our policy is to promote the dollar. And so in that sense, we have a policy of promoting the use of the US dollar as the main alternative to any other currency, whether it be crypto or the RMB or the euro. We want to promote the adoption of the dollar, and we have a policy of wanting to promote a strong dollar.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So to be clear, this is just a different version of the RMB, is the central bank digital currency version of it. But if you look at even the actions in Venezuela, a big part of that was the fact that all the oil was being settled outside of the dollar, correct?
That's right. So I'm not going to comment exactly on the payment mechanisms that Venezuela was using, but what I will say is that you're completely correct that cryptocurrencies have in the past been used by a number of entities looking at evading oversight for the application of and enforcement of sanctions.
Yeah, well, I want to be clear, Tether is not the same things as central bank digital currency. This is the state running complete monopoly on the money. So I'll say, yeah, we'll work to get some information to the State Department. So I think countering this is really essential to defending the dollar. If you look at BRICS, that is their tool for undermining the dollar. So if you look, you're familiar with what the BRICS are trying to do to counter the power of the dollar, correct?
Congressman, it sounds like this is an issue that you're right that the BRICS work has tried to undermine the U.S. in a very comprehensive way, including in the area of currency. They are indeed working to establish an alternative payment network to SWIFT and the U.S. dollar. It sounds like your office and yourself have given the issue of cryptocurrencies a great deal of thought and consideration. And we would, because this is not an issue that historically has been a big focus of the State Department, if this is something that you're passionate about, we would welcome working with your team in order to help understand a little bit better the work that you've done in this space to see if there's anything that we can do in the cryptocurrency space in order to promote the U.S. dollar.
Yeah, thank you for that. And, I think, as my time rapidly winds down here, I just want to say, as the chairman for National Security and Illicit Finance, one of the main tasks we have is to reauthorize the Defense Production Act and the Export-Import Bank. So as you look, XM just announced a critical minerals reserve, so that we're doing something like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, with respect to critical minerals. And the Defense Production Act has been heavily used to really focus on our national security. So could you briefly highlight how important those two tools are for the kit bag in your division?
The Defense Production Act is incredibly important. I mean, in an era where the basic position, we believe that promoting American industry is incredibly important, but we are not trying to do this in-house. We believe in using different tools that the U.S. government has in creating and instating incentives that allows and encouraging the private sector to lead. And the Defense Production Act is one of those tools that is incredibly important that the U.S. government has to actually create market incentives to encourage private investment in industries that are incredibly strategic. So I completely agree on the importance of those tools.
Yep, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you.
Representative Sherflis McCormick.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Undersecretary Helberg, for being here today. The U.S. government and the African Union Commission recently agreed to establish the U.S.-AU Commission, Strategic Infrastructure and Investment Working Group. This is a breakthrough. For the first time, we are explicitly aligning U.S. commercial diplomacy with African-led solutions, specifically the AU Agenda 2063 and its vision for integrated, prosperous content. This isn't just a diplomatic gesture, it's recognition that Africa's market, soon to be $29 trillion economy by 2025. Indeed, we can't afford to ignore the fact that Africa is the world's next greatest frontier. With a population of 2.5 billion by 2050, it means that 1 in 4 people on the planet will be African, with the largest labor force. Truly, I move beyond and now, to truly move beyond non-reciprocal nature of AGOA, do you believe that we should codify this partnership?
So I completely agree with your diagnosis, Congresswoman, on the strategic importance of Africa. In fact, that's one of the very reasons why the administration and my office in particular has been very engaged in the resolution of the conflict between the DRC and Rwanda. Our office has been very focused on a subset of that issue set known as the REEF, the Regional Economic Integration Framework between the DRC and Rwanda that aims at promoting investment in infrastructure as well as mineral security in order to deepen our economic partnership with the DRC and Rwanda. Mm-hmm. I traveled not too long after being sworn in to the Ivory Coast, where I was able to meet a lot of different heads of state because in sub-Saharan Africa, the heads of state attend each other's inaugurations, which provided me with an opportunity to do a lot of bilateral meetings. I met with the newly elected president of Senegal, the former president of Niger, along with several other presidents. And our administration wants to engage Africa a lot more.
I want to go back to the original question and make sure we have it clear that you do agree that it should be codified?
So I'm not going to comment on the administration's position on AGOA.
No, this is not about GOA, but what we were talking about is the progress you've already made, that commission. Do you believe, the reason why I'm asking you is because I have a bill that actually does exactly what you guys are doing. And I just wanted to go on record that you agree with it so we can bring it to the floor. Do you agree with it?
And sorry, agree with what exactly?
So we're talking about the USAU Commission Strategic Infrastructure Investment Working Group. You have the working group. You guys are strategically working on it actively. And do you believe that it should be codified? Because I have introduced a bill that actually does the same thing. So regardless of what administration is present, we have it codified and we'll be working on it consistently.
I'd be happy to follow up with your office to look at the details of the bill that your team's developed. In order to have a more informed view on it, Congresswoman.
Okay, wonderful. My next question is, you've spoken frequently about using policy levers to shape corporate environments. As we look at the competition for critical minerals and digital infrastructure, the data is clear. Africa is home to 1.3 billion customers and the world's youngest workforce. I want to get on the record a few things that we might see if we agree or disagree of how we can actually work together to move this forward. Do you agree that restrictive visa policies, which prevent African entrepreneurs and investors from visiting the U.S. to close a deal, undermines our commercial diplomacy agenda?
So I do think that visa decisions, which I will say does not totally fall under the authority of my office, but I do think those are different than our ability to engage a lot of African countries. And I'll give you one example. In the last week and a half, we rolled out a $200 million foreign assistance package that actually helps provide access to low-cost smartphones in the Indo-Pacific. We believe that that's potentially a model, if proven successful, that could be replicated in other geographies like sub-Saharan Africa. The reason why I think it's important and related to your comment is because access to American technology doesn't just promote access for American companies to those markets, but it also helps encourage entrepreneurship in those countries. It gives entrepreneurs the tools to be able to build businesses and actually build a livelihood for themselves.
So I understand that point, but I want to get back to the importance of the visas and the culture competency. A lot of the conversations we're having with stakeholders, especially in Africa, they feel insulted by the visa restrictions and trying to understand the insult, the injury, and how we can remediate it. I just want to point out the restrictions and the effect it's having on the entrepreneurs who we want to engage. And then my last question, I only have 17 minutes, is the role of the African diaspora within the United States. What role or what vision do you have to incorporate them into the process to make sure things like the cultural differences, that we don't want to offend anybody?
Sure. So as the Economic Affairs Secretariat, we are very focused on the economic relationships between our companies with those places, and we really try to deepen our bond between the U.S. and strategic countries in sub-Saharan Africa through business relationships, through investments. Our supply chain security is the low-hanging fruit because a lot of those countries actually have a lot of opportunity to contribute, to make unique contributions to our supply chains. As you know, the Consular Affairs bureau at the State Department is the bureau that oversees visas policy. We do not. And so they would probably be much better suited to answer your questions on different parameters of our visa policy with sub-Saharan Africa.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you.
Representative Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your service, and wanted to first touch on the new outbound investment screening tool that we've given to the President. As you know, the President signed into law through the NDAA last year the Comprehensive Outbound Investment National Security, or COINS Act. The COINS Act effectively codifies the President's America First investment policy memorandum and ensures that Americans are not unknowingly funding the Chinese military-industrial complex by restricting the flow of investments into Chinese military companies and critical technologies, including artificial intelligence. The Treasury Department is going to play a major role in that, but the State Department will have a role as well. There is a sanctions component to the legislation. As your bureau oversees sanctions policy at the department, how should the administration think about defining artificial intelligence in their outbound rulemaking? And will limiting investments into AI that advances Chinese military and surveillance capabilities onshore those investments into U.S. firms and therefore supercharge U.S. competitiveness?
So my understanding of the existing rules adopted by Commerce are based on limitations of threshold capacities for different semiconductor chips. The AI exports that are currently authorized to China are for fourth generation chips. They're not for first, second, or third. So capacity threshold is obviously a key criteria. Applications, the propensity and potential of applications for military technologies is another, and overall volume really matters. So the current rule rolled out by BIS in January actually has a 50% cap.
Yeah, and if I could reclaim my time, Secretary, I'm really not speaking to the export control piece, and I know that's BIS is within your purview. I just want to flag for you that this new outbound investment screening tool is also important as another arrow in the quiver, and very, very important that the State Department also, with Commerce, with Treasury, work to restrict investments into these critical technologies and do it the right way with kind of a green light, red light approach. So let me move on to, I'd like to talk about the Western Hemisphere and DFC. A lot of activity at the beginning of the administration on pushing China out of Panama and the canal. Give us an update. What is DFC doing to catalyze private American friendly investment into the canal and push Chinese malign investment out?
So, as you know, thanks to the work of the Congress, the reauthorization of last year appropriated $205 billion for the DFC, which really gives the DFC the kind of resources that it needs to credibly compete with China's Belt and Road Initiative. With respect to the Panama Canal, last month, the Panamanian Supreme Court invalidated the concessions of CK Hutchinson, the Chinese company, which effectively paves the way for BlackRock to do a buyout of an 80% stake in those concessions in the Panama Canal. We obviously very much welcome those developments. This is an issue that the president cares about. He mentioned it in his inauguration speech. And so we're tracking those developments very closely. And I would add that we are also in contact with the Panamanians to find ways of actually building on that success to expand our cooperation with them, including in the area of logistics and supply chain.
Thank you for your focus on that, and more American investment in the canal, less Chinese. That's, I think, your mission, and the president is obviously prioritized that. Appreciate it. 2024, I voted for the creation of the U.S. Foundation for Natural Security and Counterterrorism. This foundation will leverage private sector philanthropy to enhance federal resources and accelerate critical projects in many places where Belt and Road needs to be countered. Once active, the foundation will play a critical role in making America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. Will you help us ensure that this important public-private partnership is fully launched as quickly as possible?
I'm happy to work with you on that, absolutely.
Thank you very much. And I think cracking down on Chinese illegal mining, logging, and wildlife trafficking is a good strategic part of our objectives in countering Belt and Road. With that, I yield back.
Representative Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Undersecretary. I appreciate you being here, brother. How do y'all plan to expand trade relations with South Asian nations beyond India? And I'm sorry if this question's been asked, but when you're the 435th most important member of Congress, so every time I ask a question, I need you to answer it like that is the most incredible question I've had today.
It's Congressman, it's the best question I've heard all day.
Bingo.
So I appreciate the question. It's Southeast Asia is actually one of the first parts of the world that I traveled to after being sworn in. I traveled to the ASEAN Summit, the APEC Summit, and so I went to Malaysia. Singapore is the first place I went to. Singapore is a signatory to Pax Silica. We're working to engage Southeast Asia on supply chain security. It really is a hub of manufacturing. Singapore is home to one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds and 10% of the world's semiconductor fabrication capacity. And that's just Singapore. That's before you include the Philippines and Vietnam, which are also home to incredibly deep manufacturing capacity. So we believe that engaging Southeast Asia is incredibly important. We are having active conversations with several of those countries on specific project opportunities and infrastructure projects to actually expand that cooperation and accelerate the securing of our supply chains.
Let me expand on that. You expanding, can we combat China's Belt and Road Initiative by offering countries an economic alternative?
Absolutely. And let me tell you how. China aims at using state-owned enterprises to build projects that are primarily debt traps, and everyone knows that, entirely in-house. We are going to leverage our private sector in a bilateral, a plurilateral, and a multilateral way in order to actually deploy private capital in a way that is revenue generating and positive sum for the beneficiaries and for our companies. Countries, everyone knows these projects that China's rolling out are debt traps. They're incredibly unpopular. I haven't been to a single country that says that they want more China. And so it's incredibly encouraging. We believe that the American private sector and the power of American industry is our best foreign policy tool. And it is the reason why 11 countries in less than 4 months have lined up to sign up to Pax Silica, is because everyone wants to be a part of the AI revolution. And so we plan to wield that as a tool to advance our interests.
Do you think it'd be wise for us in our economic interest to be independent economically from China? I mean, is there, I just, you know, and I'm a motorcycle guy, and I remember when Harley Davidson was actually in the motorcycle business, I guess I'll say, before a guy with a man bun was their CEO. I didn't ride he never ridden a dadgum motorcycle in his life, but I'm not bitter. But I remembered how they went to China, and they started trying to sell motorcycles in China, and I mean, they just put the screws to them. There was no way you had to sell to the hierarchy, and you couldn't sell within this certain thing. And I mean, they did it just to say, hey, we're in China, is what it ended up being. But we just got totally ripped off, and these gutless politicians in this country, you know, we bend over backwards. I'd say half of us would be walking around naked if we didn't have, if our clothing wasn't made in China. I mean, just look at every industry out there and how we're so dependent on them, and I worry about that. But also, I understand the world view that we're going to have some business with them. So, go ahead.
So China has not made a secret of their plans and intentions to decouple from us. So the question is, are we comfortable staying dependent on them while they actively try to decouple from us? And the answer is that the policy of our administration is to have supply chain resilience and de-risk our supply chains. That's why we hosted one of the largest ministerials in the State Department's history. 55 countries on February 4th came to because those countries share our concerns and they agree with us on the need for supply chain resilience. China rolled out export controls on their refined minerals that were entirely unacceptable, and we think everyone agrees, which is why they attended the ministerial. And ultimately, we are working with our partners in Taiwan, including TSMC and others, including Foxconn, in order to reshore semiconductor manufacturing in America. And Secretary Lutnick's work has culminated with a pledge of $250 billion of investment in order to reshore 40% of TSMC's production capacity in the US, which is really historic. So we want to secure the supply chain at all layers: minerals, semiconductor manufacturing, and all the rest.
Thank you. gone over by 45 seconds, and I gladly take that from Representative Lawler. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lawler, you're recognized for 4 minutes and 10 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Undersecretary, thank you for being here. Illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing is a global problem, and China is the primary perpetrator. The CCP supports the world's largest distant water fishing fleet, which pollutes and illegally fishes the high seas with the exclusive economic zone of countries in the South Pacific, South America, and Africa. Aside from the impacts on coastal communities and fish stocks, IUU fuels corruption, funds transnational organized crime, and facilitates labor abuses and drug trafficking. It also undermines U.S. fishermen who play by the rules. Last Congress, we worked to create the U.S. Foundation for National Security and Counterterrorism to bring together philanthropic funding and federal funding in a public-private partnership to bring stability to these regions, making them engines of economic growth rather than targets for those who seek to do harm to America's interest. Success of the foundation can be another major accomplishment of both President Trump and Secretary Rubio's vision for an America First policy agenda. Mr. Helberg, will you work with us to ensure the implementation of the foundation as expeditiously as possible?
I'm happy to do so, Congressman.
You are not able to?
I am. I'm happy
sorry.
to work with you to ensure the implementation.
Great, thank you. The President's national security strategy calls expanded economic relationships in the Middle East, relationships that go beyond oil and gas and prioritize nuclear energy, AI, and defense technologies. Since the strategy was released, how has the State Department been working to expand these types of economic partnerships?
So we have rolled out the AI Export Program, which is the whole of government approach to promoting the adoption of American technology, both in the Middle East and in other places. As you know, one of the unique attributes of the Middle East is the Middle East required bespoke bilateral deals because prior to the revision of the Global Diffusion Rule, Middle Eastern countries were deemed Tier 3 countries and therefore were restricted on the amount of chips that they could get. We don't currently have nearly the same amount of restrictions or scrutiny for countries in Europe. So European countries can already have access to American technology with nearly no restrictions. And so at the end of the day, we want to promote the adoption of American technology. And so we want to do it with the right guardrails, which is why we worked with our partners in the UAE on the development of a security framework that's completely voluntary, that actually creates a first of its kind cryptography platform that allows tracking tokens to make sure that as more countries buy large computing clusters, those computing clusters are not used by our adversaries. So on the one hand, we have a very aggressive promote agenda, and on the other, we have a verify agenda that we are trying to roll out through technology tools in order to scale verification alongside the promotion.
Great, and as you work through that, I think we should work together if there are things that Congress can do to help facilitate this more quickly. We should be working to do that. The Commerce Department has proposed cutting the staff for the United States and Foreign Commercial Service by more than half. This has led to considerations about whether to move U.S. FCS back to the State Department. Do you believe that FCS officers are generally well integrated at posts and are able to coordinate well with FSOs? And from your vantage point, what are the pros and cons of moving the FCS to state?
So I have not encountered any challenges or limitations on based on headcount. We have economic officers dispatched at embassies, and we've been able to work with them quite well. With that being said, being only 4 months into this role, I would welcome the opportunity to work with your team to, as you know, I obviously continue to travel to more places and work with economic officers dispatched in different places to really give full and proper considerations to the pros and cons of additional follow-up work on the coordination between Commerce officers and State Department officers.
I appreciate that, and certainly in the scope of what the administration is trying to do from a foreign policy standpoint and really drive the economic prosperity around the globe to build those relationships, that is something I think we should evaluate whether or not that should be moved over to state.
Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back.
Representative Kumlager-Dove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Undersecretary Helberg, for being here today. Undersecretary Helberg, your flagship PAC Silica initiative is focused on securing the semiconductor and AI supply chain and, quote, ensuring aligned partners build the AI ecosystem of tomorrow. But it is an open question whether one of those partners, the UAE and its national champion G42, is an aligned partner of the United States or just of the president. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that the chair of G42, who was also the UAE National Security Advisor, purchased a $500 million stake in Trump's crypto company just a few months before Trump greenlit 100,000 advanced AI chips to G42 and 400,000 chips to other firms in the UAE. Suspicious, concerning. Many folks would question if this is the greatest corruption scandal of this administration. Now, your PAC Silica initiative is further deepening ties between this administration and G42. So, Undersecretary Helberg, are you aware that the U.S. intelligence community has had concerns about G42's tech cooperation with China?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. As part of this role, I get intelligence briefings and access to a lot of, if not all of the information available about the UAE as well as G42. What I will say is the UAE is an incredibly important partner. They are a major investor who has pledged to invest $1.4 trillion in the United States. We have, not to cut you off, but you know that we all have limited time. But given the fact that you are getting briefings, and yes, the UAE is a strategic partner, I would assume that in your position, you've had access to briefings with information that might be enlightening, concerning, and you would use that information, right, to help in the decisions that are being made about agreements and ties that are happening between us and UAE. You would. What I will say, in all honesty, Congresswoman, is the briefings that I've had about the UAE and G42 are not substantially out of step. Is that the UAE has mostly, on the whole, complied with a lot when the U.S. government expresses concerns to the UAE government on various transactions involving China. The UAE has mostly worked to address those concerns. And if I could just add one more thing, the issues that have been points of concern are not substantially out of step with issues that tend to be concerns with a vast majority of partners, not just the UAE, including Canada.
So I'm going to have to, you can probably get to some of this in an additional question. Did the administration conduct a thorough assessment of G42's ties to China before bringing it into the PAC Silica initiative?
There's only so much that I can talk about in an unclassified setting, Congresswoman, but we did a very thorough due diligence.
Could you then share the unclassified assessment with Congress, with this body? I mean, if the information that you received, you're suggesting, did not imperil the agreement, is that information that you could share?
So I just did. And the assessment is that the issues that have been points of concern about the UAE's connections to China, the UAE government has actually undertaken steps, verifiable steps, to correct for those concerns when they were presented.
So has G42 severed ties with the PRC?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. Do you anticipate that
And if I could just add, not only have they severed ties,
I
but
have
they,
only 49 seconds.
Okay.
So I'm done, you can say that. Do you anticipate that the administration will greenlight more advanced chips to G42?
I'm not aware of any plans. The chips that have already been authorized in the bilateral AI acceleration partnership are obviously substantial. I'm not aware of any additional plans to authorize new chips on top of that.
Okay, so I think, and many members of this committee and folks in the intelligence community think that it is a blatant act of corruption for the president to give a company access to advanced chips, especially when the chair has personally paid him hundreds of millions of dollars. I know you can't speak to that, but I did send a letter with the ranking members of 4 separate committees to the Inspector General of the Commerce Department to investigate what is going on. I thank you for your testimony, and I thank you for the answers that you have shared today, and I'm sure that you can now say, because I'm sure the chair will give you time to reference that article that you have with you. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Sure. So I'll be very brief, but I'll just say that on your point about G42, not only am I not aware of any ongoing ties between G42 and China, but G42, in an act of good faith, has undertaken voluntary steps to actually create a new infrastructure platform that uses cryptography and end user verification in order to track every token on their cluster to provide an unprecedented level of transparency to help give us assurance that their clusters are actually not being used in ways that violate US law and UAE laws. And I think it's a welcome step. Our approach is trust but verify. And ultimately, we very much welcome the steps that they've taken. What's that?
I said you have very strong eyebrow game, by the way.
Thank you.
Was that on your time or Chairman McCall's or Chairman Emeritus McCall?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think your eyebrows look great, yeah, for the record. Secretary, it's great to see you. Let me commend and applaud you for your recent appointment to Secretary. I want to commend the administration for their picking such a talented person in the technology space. You know, I've been to your Hill or Valley to the Hill, summits here on the Hill, talking about technology. You were also, on the China Commission for many years when I was chairman, worked really well with you on your recommendations on China, as they are the great power competition that we face. And I know your personal views about China and your public views, and they pretty much are the same. And it is that China is the greatest threat that we face today. I wanted to give you an opportunity, if you haven't so far. I know this Pax Silica is a very interesting concept to me. And it's an alliance between the United States and our partner nations moving forward on technology, obviously semiconductors, but AI, which is going to be the future of warfare. When we talk about advanced weapon systems like the AUKUS bill that I passed, bringing together UK and Australia, United States, to advance AI technologies and also quantum with advanced weapons. Now, I know that's not under the E department, that's more arms. But if you could, I know you just got back recently from India and had a very successful meeting with Mr. Modi over there. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the importance of Pax Silica, what it is doing to advance our interest abroad and to accelerate the core AI race against China.
Thank you so much, and I'll be brief to be mindful of time, but I completely share your sentiment. It's great to see you, and you were indeed at the very first Hill and Valley Forum many years ago, so it's been great to work with you all these years. With respect to Pax Silica, so we have 3 lines of effort. The goal is to secure our supply chains, and we want to focus on artificial intelligence. because we believe it's one of the most transformative technologies that will affect the future of our economy. Our 3 lines of effort include membership, so focusing on being very deliberate and strategic about the composition of the group. The group now includes Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Australia, Israel, the UAE, Qatar, the UK, and Greece. We included India just about 3 days ago, and Taiwan is also part of the group. The second track is projects, infrastructure projects. And when it comes to projects, we're focused on logistics, infrastructure, and industrial capacity. The basic premise is we believe that logistics is key if we want to secure supply chains, because we can have access to minerals and factories, but if we don't have a way of moving things around efficiently and in a cost-effective way, that we will not have secure supply chains. And industrial capacity, because we have offshored all of that capacity. Our supply chains are filled with thousands of vendors that we have very little visibility into. And so we want to create an environment where we reduce the information silos and we have more industrial might in order to do surge capacity when we need to. The last line of effort is policy. We want to use Pax Silica as a platform to coordinate at a policy level with our partner countries, especially and including for developing baseline definitions for us to agree for how we define sensitive technologies and critical infrastructure. We want to coordinate on anti-dumping practices and market incentives, and we also want to agree on a pro-innovation agenda for AI.
Well, I think this is one of your legacy items, and I'm glad again you're in the position you're in to advance these sort of creative ideas. I always find, Mr. Chairman, when you have an economic alliance with countries, in addition to the weapon sales that this committee does, but military, but then the economic and diplomatic efforts really solidify those alliances with a common goal against our adversaries, and I think that's precisely what Pax Silica does. And I look forward to hearing more good news from you on that issue. And let me commend you for your service, sir. And with that, my time's expired. I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Emeritus McCall. I think I want to recognize Representative Font. I don't know if I want to recognize your father. That's your father over there?
He's smarter than I am, so that you might get a better speech. But
I feel
yeah,
like
that's
I'd
my
love
father.
to recognize your father to say a few words about you.
Oh no, we don't want that.
I bet.
Okay. My time? All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have my father with me, and as the grandfather and a father to a Jacob, we're very proud of the work that you're doing, and thank you for all the testimony you did. I'll try to be a little more polite than some of my Democrat colleagues were a little bit earlier. But I think what's important about your testimony today is that economic power is American power, and we should be primed to be and remain that superpower because we have 3 things that other countries don't have. In many cases, we have extraordinary natural resources that we can harvest. Not in all, but in many cases, certainly in energy, for example. The size of our economy makes us extraordinarily powerful because we are a market that people desperately need to be in if they want to be successful. We're the largest market in the world, and we need to leverage that power. And then third, we have an entrepreneurial spirit in this country as part of our culture that you don't find anywhere else. And as somebody who started, built, and grew 3 entrepreneurial businesses, I know what that is like. You don't find that entrepreneurial spirit. I once saw a statistic that said that the size of the Home Depot on a market cap is larger than all of the businesses that have been started in Europe over the last several decades. They just don't have that same sort of entrepreneurial spirit that we do here. And so the strategy that we have now has got to be focused, and I know you're doing this. It's about making trade fair. It's about making sure that we have access to those critical minerals, making sure that we have national security in what we make and build so we're not ever again dependent on China like we were during COVID. That was a real problem. Making sure we harness energy and making sure we continue to make sure America is the most innovative economy in the world. So with that said, I want to ask you what your strategy is as it relates to critical minerals throughout the world, because that is something that we may not simply have enough here in America. If we just stick our shovel in the ground, we'll be able to get what we need. Most things we do. But some of these critical rare earth minerals, we don't. So what's our plan to get them and to prevent Chinese state companies from pushing us out of the market?
Thank you for the opportunity to opine on that, Congressman. So our strategy for critical minerals, this is actually a centerpiece of the work that we do for Pax Silica. Our strategy for critical minerals really involves leveraging the expertise of the private sector in order to prioritize the most promising, highest impact mineral refining and mineral extraction projects. So and I'm sure your teams have experienced this too, the US government gets flooded with thousands of projects. Everyone has a mineral project these days. The challenge is how to prioritize which projects are real and which projects are brownfield and actually have the real opportunity to scale and provide scale. We want to pursue a concentration of force strategy where we focus on a finite number of projects that have the highest potential and that can provide, that can deliver on the biggest scale possible. So I've directed my team to prioritize those projects. I told them to provide me with a list of the 10 most promising projects for refining and the 10 most promising projects for mining. We are evaluating those projects as we speak. We want to use private sector capital to actually capitalize those projects. We are facilitating offtake agreements in order to ensure stable sources of revenue for those projects. And we have ongoing conversations with the Development Finance Corporation to provide supplemental financing where needed for those projects. The last piece that I would add, beyond the coordination of offtake agreements and the provision of capital, the key is pricing. The market works incredibly well, provided there are real, market dynamics, which obviously we are in the situation we're in because we have not had a free and floating market. We have had a market that has been the target of dumping and abuse by state-owned Chinese mineral companies that have artificially depressed the price for years and that have intentionally driven everyone out of business. And so part of what we've done is when we convened the Critical Minerals Ministerial on February 4th, the administration unveiled a pricing mechanism that would actually help offset the depreciation and price of minerals coming out of China. Price is the key to unlock private capital. If we provide investors with price stability, private capital follows. And so we're looking at those two lines of effort.
Good. And I would simply note that the reason they depressed the prices for so long is to put everyone out of business, and then they can raise them to whatever they want. And so it is a predatory strategy used to damage us long term. Again, we appreciate the work that you're doing and keep it up.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Who wants to go first, Castro or Stanton? All right, Mr. Stanton, you're up.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for that wise decision. Undersecretary Helberg, I have constituents currently stranded in Mexico.
Time has expired.
I have constituents currently stranded in Mexico following the operation that led to the capture of the drug cartel leader known as El Mencho and his killing. We have received numerous reports from constituents that the State Department's consular emergency hotline, the number that they put out publicly for people to call, is going unanswered. My own staff has tested the number repeatedly. No one picks up. I'm asking you to maybe contact the leadership of the department, including Secretary Rubio, to let them know if they're going to put that number out there. It's such an emergency situation. You got to have people to answer the phones. You got to ramp up staffing on that. Obviously, it's great frustration and angst for the people stranded in Mexico currently. Mr. Chairman, commercial diplomacy is the daily on-the-ground work of advancing American economic power, but commercial diplomacy requires credibility, competitiveness, and coalition building to be effective. Unfortunately, President Trump's tariff regime is single-handedly, illegally, and unconstitutionally destroying all three of those pillars. First, Trump's tariff regime is inherently and blatantly illegal. We tell the world we believe in rules-based trading system. We expect countries to honor agreements and follow the law. That is how the United States must lead. On Friday, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in a 6-3 decision that Trump's IEEPA tariffs were illegal and unconstitutional, declaring, quote, the framers did not vest any part of the taxing power in the executive branch, unquote. Instead of respecting that decision, Trump announced a new 15% blanket tariff. This disregard for the rule of law at home makes it a lot harder to demand it overseas. Our diplomats should be enforcing standards, not explaining why our own policy keeps shifting. Credibility is leverage. This action by the president makes us weaker. Second, the issue of competitiveness. A tariff is a tax that is paid by the American people. And yet this Republican majority and its leadership have rolled over for this president even as they block Democratic attempts to reassert congressional power. Power the Supreme Court has reaffirmed belongs here in the House of Representatives. Even as the average family in America paid on average $1,700 more per year in additional costs. Now, I have the honor of representing Chandler, Arizona in Congress, and recently the Chandler Chamber of Commerce connected me with one of its leading members, a company called Falco, a small aerospace manufacturer in South Chandler that makes specialized aluminum products for the aircraft supply chain, including customers like Boeing, Cessna, and Lockheed Martin. They need a specific aerospace-grade aluminum that is not available anywhere in the United States. So when tariffs hit, Falco could not switch to an American supplier. They simply had to eat the cost. Falco's Chief Operating Officer, Greg Faley, is here with me today. Please stand, Greg. He is my guest for tonight's State of the Union. He said Falco's costs have gone up 72% this year because of these tariffs. That meant that means that Falco can't hire more people or meet the needs demanded by our national security industry. And the president still hasn't learned from his mistakes. After the Supreme Court ruling, Trump turned around to bash the justices of the Supreme Court and immediately put another 15% blanket tariff, another tax on the American people. That weakens both the United States companies and commercial diplomacy. These tariffs are not just defeating, they are self-defeating. Third, on the issue of coalition building, commercial diplomacy is about working with partners. I also serve on the China Select Committee. If we are serious about competing with China, we need our allies with us. Retaliatory tariffs spark retaliation. They strain relationships. They push countries to protect themselves from swings in U.S. policy. Close allies begin boycotting American goods. Supply chains are weakened because Trump made it more expensive to sell to the United States market. And our biggest trading partners started to make trade deals without us. Just this week, Canadian Prime Minister Carney is working to diversify trade away from the United States. This comes after he had warmed trade relations with China. Undersecretary, you have a very important job. Commercial diplomacy is essential to opening markets for U.S. companies, protecting American innovation, promoting investments in our nation. But your boss's illegal and unconstitutional tariff war is working against you every day. I wish more of my colleagues on the side of the aisle would have your back like we need to. I yield back.
Representative Castro.
Thank you, Chairman. Undersecretary Helberg, you've described Pax Silica as turning, quote, diplomats into business development officers for American AI. And you personally negotiated the UAE's entry into the initiative in January of this year, and you keynoted India's accession just last week. The explicit purpose of this initiative is to help American AI companies sell their products and expand into allied markets. Is that a fair characterization?
The goal of the initiative is to secure our supply chains, Congressman.
And your federal ethics agreement acknowledges, and again I'm quoting, quote, heightened risk of a conflict of interest in artificial intelligence software. Your filed ethics forms confirm that you divested from directly owned stock in AI and semiconductor companies, but you will continue to indirectly own stakes in AI companies like OpenAI and SpaceX through equity stakes in the Founders Fund and Khosla Ventures. That stake was explicitly retained under your ethics agreement. It wasn't divested.
That's not correct, Congressman. I actually divested from OpenAI.
You still retain an interest in OpenAI and SpaceX through Founders Fund? You still have a stake in Founders Fund and Khosla LA? Khosla?
That's not correct, Congressman. I've divested all my interest from
both of those pieces, from Founders Fund and
I divested the interest in OpenAI. I divested most of the Founders Fund interests
Does your spouse own stakes in those?
That's right. That's right. Well, we're talking about the same assets.
So your household, just like for members of Congress, we've got to disclose what we own and what our spouse owns.
Well, you guys aren't subject to nearly 108-page ethics agreements, respectively. But yes,
you're, in your household, your spouse owns what I've described.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
sure.
But what I'm saying is that we've divested from those.
But I just asked you, and you said yes, your spouse still owns.
No. You
Founders
asked me.
Fund
I was saying that these are the assets of my spouse. They're not mine. They're
Right.
treated as one and the same for the purpose of ethics. But what I'm saying is we have divested from our stake in OpenAI and most of the Founders Fund interests.
Yeah, I said that you directly divested from OpenAI, right? But through Founders Fund and SpaceX, through Founders Fund and Khosla Ventures, they still have stakes in those companies. Is that correct?
No, Congressman. What I'm saying is I no longer have any financial interest in OpenAI, direct or indirect, and that we have also divested from most of the interest in Founders Fund.
Okay, then if we'll go through. Yeah, no, absolutely. That we must have an old filing then. All right.
Probably, yeah.
So then let me ask you about mining. Illegal mining for critical minerals, gold, and other materials is recognized as a major and growing transnational criminal economy, frequently linked to money laundering, human trafficking, and violence. It also contributes to the significant arms trafficking in the region, some of which has been on display in Mexico after the recent killings of a drug kingpin. What specific steps are you taking at the State Department to leverage diplomatic engagement, foreign assistance, and law enforcement cooperation alongside commercial policy and other measures to more effectively disrupt illegal mining networks?
So our biggest priority, Congressman, is to advance our national interest, and our biggest the biggest pain point from an economic security standpoint is our mining reliance on China. And so we're working to de-risk those supply chains. We are working in tandem with countries who are home to large mining concessions, whether it's the Democratic Republic of Congo, Australia, along with various South American countries, in order to identify brownfield mining concessions, as well as the opportunity to expand refining capacity within the next 24 months through the deployment of capital to expand existing refineries.
But I wanted to ask you specifically, what steps you're taking, what measures to more effectively disrupt illegal mining networks?
So my understanding is that a lot of the illegal activities are actually being conducted by Chinese-run companies in sub-Saharan Africa. And so the best thing that we could do to fight illegal mining networks is actually buy out China's stakes in those concessions in order to bring them under the oversight of American companies. As you know, American companies are subject to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is obviously leaps and bounds different than the lack of standards that Chinese companies operate by. So if American companies run the concessions, they will inherently be substantially more ethical and accountable than Chinese companies ever will.
I'm out of time.
Thank you, Representative Castro. I often save my questions for the end, and I have a couple of questions for you as well. As Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment, I would love to hear your threat assessment of China. What, to your extent, do you believe, or rather, what do you believe is the extent of trust that you have in China, whether you trust they will do something or you trust that they will not do something? Outline to me your threat assessment in China, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The administration's policy towards China is we want a stable, constructive relationship with China. With that being said, it is also true that we do not trust China. And having a stable relationship with them is not in contradiction with not trusting them. China has not given us many reasons to trust them. One of the reasons why the president's tariff policy is so important right now is because much of the world that does not have similar tariff regimes is on the receiving end of what many are characterizing as a China shock 2.0. China's export surplus towards the rest of the world exceeded $1.2 trillion last year, a record. They are flooding the world with cheap smartphones. They're flooding the world with cheap telecom. They're flooding the world with cheap BYD electric vehicles. And frankly, it's a major problem for Europe. It's a major problem for Southeast Asia. A lot of European governments are actually increasingly becoming vocal. For the first time in my lifetime, they're becoming increasingly vocal about the challenges that China faces. So they're a formidable economic competitor and adversary. And so we are working to outcompete them while at the same time doing what we have to do to secure our supply chains and make sure that our companies are built on sound foundations where they can build and lead the world in technology.
Thank you. Is there a place that you assess China will not seek to overtake the United States?
China has made no qualms about their plans to try to overtake us. To their great chagrin, they are decelerating economically. And you know, in 2009, the BBC and Goldman Sachs issued a forecast that by 2025, China's economy would overtake the United States. And it is a quintessentially American underdog story that America has defied all those forecasts of people who predicted American decline. America remains the world's largest economy by a lot. At the end of last year, the world's top 10 companies in the world by market cap were all American companies. And so we are in a very strong position. With that being said, as you know from your life in politics, the only way to compete in a race is to run unopposed or scared. And so we can't take anything for granted, which is why we are working in as fast as humanly possible to secure our supply chains.
In a race, I want us to run faster, but I always say I'm not afraid to trip up those that we're running against as well. This isn't about a fair race. This isn't the Olympics, right? We're not running around a track looking to have a fair competition. We're looking to destroy an adversary that's working to actively destroy us, which, not to put words in your mouth, is what I am surmising of your assessment. Again, not to put words in your mouth. Do you assess there's a situation where China willingly concedes that America will dominate that sector?
Sorry, which sector?
Do you assess that there is a sector that China will just concede, all right, America, you can have that, America, you can dominate? Do you assess that there's a sector they will concede to us?
My assessment is on all the most important sectors related to technology, China has very well laid out plans to try to continue moving up the value chain and dominate those sectors. They, want to compete. They, as you point out, they don't play fair. They never do. And ultimately, Americans are very competitive too. The Trump administration is extremely competitive. And so
God for that.
We're playing to win. And so we do want to have a stable, constructive relationship with China. The president has a positive relationship with Xi Jinping. At the same time, we're about the US of A, and we're never going to apologize for putting America first.
That's exactly what I expect out of you. I'm never going to apologize for that as well. Same line of questioning. Is there, and you talk about their desire to dominate, and in their desire to dominate, do you assess there's any sector, any industry where China will not dump and depress, as you were talking about earlier?
Congressman, I can't currently think of an industry where China doesn't engage in the depreciation of artificial depreciation of prices.
Very good. I thank you for answering my questions today. My time has expired, even though I guess it's my time and I'm the only one here now. But I am going to move to a closing statement. And what I typically do when I move to closing statements is I give our witness or witnesses an opportunity to respond to things that you haven't had the chance to respond to. You've had a lot of accusations and things thrown at you, and I only want a yes or no answer and no opportunity for you to really answer things. But I guess maybe I would frame this opportunity for you to close this hearing out with, you said we're very competitive. That defines us as Americans, that we are competitive, right? I always love the old speech from George S. Patton, where he's talking to the Army and he's saying, Americans love a winner, they hate a loser. To Americans, the idea of losing and laughing is hateful, right? We love the big league ball players and the championship boxers. Basically, we don't lose and laugh. We fight, and we fight to the end. That's why we've never lost a war, and we'll never lose a war. We're just different. We're built differently, and I'm damn proud of that. So, tell me, in your words, about you're most proud of the competition that we've levied in this last year against the rest of the globe in this closing remarks, if you don't mind.
Well, let me just say that as someone who spent most of my adult life in Silicon Valley and in the tech industry, I'm incredibly proud of the ingenuity that our country has had. We have defied the odds at critical junctures when people least expected it. At many points in our country's history, when the academic parlor halls have prognosticated the slow, gradual, managed decline of our country, we always surprise. When China launched its hypersonic missile and said that it was the end of America, America surprised the world with actually surging ahead in artificial intelligence. And now China is panicking to catch up and is obviously stealing our technology to do it. I'm incredibly proud. Our policy really has three pillars, Mr. Chairman. We want to win the AI race and the technology race writ large. We're very proud that Pax Silica now includes 11 signatories in 3 months. India's accession, the Chip Concierge Service, $250 billion in investment from Taiwan, and recently the rollout of the Maritime Action Plan that all contribute to American strength. We are committed to using every tool in our toolbox, whether it's sanctions when necessary, when we want to produce maximum pressure for maximum change, as well as diplomatic and commercial partnerships. And thirdly, we welcome working with Congress as a partner to achieve the objectives that we care about.
Anything else?
That's all I have.
Very good. I want to thank you, Undersecretary, for your valuable testimony. I want to thank other members, if they're watching, for their questions. And members of the committee may have some additional questions for yourself, Undersecretary, and we will ask you to respond to those in writing. In that, pursuant to committee rules, all members may have 5 days to submit statements, questions, and extraneous materials for the record, subject to length limitations. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.